Hi everyone, it's Suzanne Wagner, and thanks for showing up for some of the astrological stuff that's happening in March and throughout 2019. As I've been dealing with my clients in February of 2019, people are feeling this tension, this stressing, this agitation as Uranus is at 29 degrees of Aries and getting ready to go into Taurus on March 7th. Uranus changing signs is a big deal, and it brings up a lot for a lot of people. So as I was looking at the astrology for March, I really started to kind of weigh out what was really going on related to the eclipses and how we're in the cycle of the eclipses in the Cancer Capricorn tangent. And what I'm noticing is that we're creating kind of a very deep purging energy in these eclipses. So I want to it's kind of like, it's weird. I'm doing the astrology for March, and I'm also kind of bringing in a wider perspective at the same time. So you're going to kind of be like, like, what is she exactly doing? But I felt like I needed to create a bigger umbrella for us to understand these intense, tumultuous cosmic energies that are happening, because I think that sometimes when you chunk it down too small, you're just sort of seeing the immediate problem rather than kind of seeing the bigger overview of what's happening. So 2019 is about letting go of all the things that are not necessary and getting to the bottom of these hungry ghosts that are inside of us, using a Buddhist term, that are never happy or satisfied. And I'm noticing people letting go of many things. They're clearing out their houses, they're clearing out garages and closets and drawers, and they're purging and they're purifying. And that's what our systems need from the toxic poisons that have sort of infiltrated our minds and our hearts. And, you know, we're feeling this on so many levels. We are kind of at this environmentally, socially, politically precarious moment. And every issue we face is going to become more pressing and more daunting and more complicated as we move closer and closer to this Saturn-Pluto conjunction that is going to be in January of 2012. So I wanted to have this overview because the cycle is not remotely over. And I kind of go, when you look at it too closely, it's like looking at something under a microscope, and it just seems so big, and it seems so daunting, and it seems like, But the further you get away from something, the more perspective you have and the more you can kind of see it. So I'm not trying to panic anybody. I'm trying to get everybody to step back and to see that the truths of our situation are multifaceted and they're multi-layered and they're so entwined and woven and convoluted that, you know, it's feeling a little overwhelming. And so these multifaceted situations are hidden behind the lies that we use to protect ourselves from the horror of our choices and inactions. And I know that everyone's feeling frozen, like they want movement, they want change, they want it to change. They're feeling, and yet nothing seems to change, and everything seems really frozen and stuck in all the winter signs because Saturn and Pluto are in winter and Neptune is in winter. And so everything is feeling, like, oh my God, I'm trying to take action, but I can't take action. So I think that waking up to what we're about and where we've contributed on the personal, global, and political levels are enough to make any of us want to kind of run. And I think that that's why it's hard for everybody to sit still and just stay present with what is. And, this is an astrological cycle that the tension is so great that, there will be people that are leaving the planet and dying and saying, this is too much. And I've noticed how many people that I personally have known that have exited in just the last couple of years. Like this, there's been this building, and it's almost like if you're older, you're just like, oh, I can't take one more thing. So there's a lot of tension that we all have to navigate over the next 2+ years. And so I feel like this tension is collectively awakening our consciousness to the abuses of power that humanity have collectively and individually faced, in the world throughout history. And it's happening so fast. It's happening at this tremendously rapid rate that I think we're feeling overwhelmed. Now, thanks to social media, conversations that used to take decades to have publicly are now being done seemingly instantaneously. And this is what is causing such divisions and upsets. We're waking up to the fact that many do not think or act in the ways that we do or that we approve of. And I think before we could be in our little social bubbles or our little cultural bubbles and think the whole world thought the way we thought. But now that's becoming really obvious that they don't think the way we think. And we have to get to the root of this pain that says, I can't cope if they don't think the way I think, or they don't believe the way I believe. I'm like, well, actually, that's kind of the way it's always been. It's never not been that way. We just didn't know that, or we didn't want to know that because we had our head in a certain place. To figure out how to collectively unpack the impact of thousands of years of lies, self-deception that we have chosen to believe, our grandparents have chosen to believe, that we've inherited to make ourselves feel okay. It's tough. It's very, very tough. There's been a lot of inequity in the world. There have been a lot of trials, traumas, and tribulations that have resulted from the distortions and the lies that we've told ourselves. And we're kind of faced with a daunting and unending task of processing the damage our ancestors and ourselves have done to our communities, humanity, nature, and this world. And that is up at the moment. The world is in distress. The animals are dying. The weather is terrible. Water shortages, too much water, storms. I mean, there's this huge, loud nature screaming that is also happening in the ethers that we can't ignore and we have to pay attention to. So this kind of process can't be sorted through with the same instantaneousness as this digital age of the millennial mindset would like. This kind of work takes a lot of time, but it also takes an unrelenting commitment to the truth. It's almost the only way to unpack this, but the truth is going to be excruciating. So I've been noticing with all the stuff that's related to Black History Month, all this information that, I think I'm pretty well read and I think I'm pretty well informed. And then I find out more information in Black history and I'm like, wow, even I'm waking up to recognizing, I always knew it was terrible, but, that humanity has been doing horrible things for thousands of years that, and we need to stop it. We need to, make a commitment to stop causing suffering, pain, horror, anguish, and inequality. We need to find a way to tell the truth because you can't stop the inequity if you are still telling yourself a lie. And, I'm so grateful for the time that we're in because these abhorrent abuses of power that have become so commonplace in our world are hiding in plain sight. And so many have blinders on or feel frozen in not knowing what to do that they still won't see it. It's really fascinating that these cycles of abuse are being called out, but they have to be called out almost continuously if they're ever going to be interrupted, interrogated, and overthrown in our world and in ourselves. It's like healing doesn't happen by continuing the lie. And I look at just the Catholic Church, and that this Pope is at least trying to bring this horrible truth about sexual abuse in the Catholic Church into the light, and talk about a big step, and it's not just there. I mean, like, there's other places that it's coming out too. We're in a moment that is requiring us to have sort of ruthless integrity, and it's going to be hard. It's going to take an incredible global effort to shine a light into what has laid in the shadows of our history and our consciousness. And it's necessary to work through this together. But it also requires incredible compassion for yourself and others along the way, because this is going to hurt. I mean, this is hard. This is tremendously difficult. And this year is the first time in many that these eclipses begin to occur in Capricorn. So not only are these eclipses in very intense positions, but they're also flanked by Saturn, Pluto, and the North Node. And these eclipses ask us to release ourselves from the structures, habits, and patterns that keep our systems clogged and dysfunctional. And that's what is so obvious right now, are the clogs, the stuckness. And so I expect over the next many years for governments to topple and new systems to be implemented. And the good news is that fears that have held us captive and stifled our growth or limited our ability to heal have to be made conscious so that they can be dismantled. And that is what is happening right now. I mean, there is so much dismantling going on, it's almost alarming. We need to look at where we have become energetic vampires and hoarders. Where are you feeding off the toxic news and the hateful energy of others? Where are you stockpiling the sewage of humanity and the garbage that people are saying, internally, externally, both? These eclipses bring awareness to the terrible toll and damage we have done to ourselves in this world. And it's a very bitter pill to swallow, and one that is not going to have to be choked down without any help from illusions and distortions. It's kind of like a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. There is no spoonful of sugar right now trying to help us choke down the truth of this. So as this month progresses, more and more energy is going to focus into the signs of Capricorn and Cancer. And Capricorn is this cardinal earth sign which manifests, builds structures and accomplishes tasks through discipline, hard work, and boundary setting. It's a sign that restricts, denies, and withholds. Because eclipses are set in a pattern, this is going to be a 2+ year cycle where we learn lessons specific to the astrology of these signs. And by December 2nd of this year, there will be 3 planets in this melancholic, cold, bitter, dry sign that highlight this year's attempt to guide us to our personal integrity, maturity, and self-mastery. We are responsible for the energy we bring into each situation. We just are. Without complete understanding that we will not ever grow into our mastery and potential of the human soul if we don't take responsibility for ourselves is a huge part of this. So with Saturn ruling these eclipses, the goal is a total shift in how we use and abuse others and ourselves. With Pluto in the mix, changes in power structures are going to happen, and the old abuses will no longer be tolerated. Pluto takes its time, as we well know, since it's been there since 2008. And this feels painfully slow to all of us. But Pluto is going to make sure that the changes that are created are long-lasting in their impact. So, occurring at the South Node, these eclipses ask us to release what is in the way of our spiritual growth. The South Node eclipses point to what needs to be purged if we're ever going to overcome the inhibiting impacts of greed, power, wealth, and hate. The last Leo eclipse that happened January 21st helped us tap into and explore the potency of living out our potential when we allow our unique self-expression to surface and take flight. The next non-Capricorn eclipse is on July 2nd, and with this total solar eclipse and a new moon in the emotionally charged water sign of Cancer, we're called to look inward. And it's time to cultivate a deeper understanding of our emotional intelligence, needs, and nourishment requirements. With the North Node also in Cancer, our appetites increase. Cancer feeds the children, it rules the stomach, and is ever voracious for emotional intimacy. This is what will attempt to balance out all the austerity of the eclipses that are happening in Capricorn this year. So, think of it like this. Capricorn builds structures. Cancer fills them with the waters of creation. Together, that would be awesome. So, tracking Saturn and Pluto, the heavyweights of the zodiac. Tracking Darth Vader and the Grim Reaper. With both Saturn and Pluto, the power players of our solar system, in Capricorn, the structures of our world that need the greatest transformations show up also as the ones that seem least open to change. Thus the problem we're in. An overemphasis of Saturnian energy when it's distorted promotes regressive patterns, repression of those different and holding positions of traditionalism and tribalism in order to feel safe. Imbalanced Saturnian energy causes the rhetoric of fear, exclusionism, and the desires to dominate over others. Lies are easily spreadable under these conditions, in case that wasn't obvious. We must work with both our internal and external landscapes in order to implement changes that will last. All things poisonous will have to be purged. The solution to any external difficulty first requires you to face the same within the self. It is the place from which we always have access, clarity, and power. So we have to start with ourselves first in order to understand the pattern. Otherwise, it won't work. Only then can you really disrupt the mechanism of our internal systems of inequity. The internal needs to shift before the external can move. The level of toxic self-denial is what keeps our souls and our societies undernourished. Get to know your own bitterness, your own hatred, and your own despair first. This is the most effective way to deal and eventually interrupt the patterns of the external world. Since Saturn is an Earth planet and it rules Capricorn and Earth sign, the themes of it are amplified while it transits through its home sign. And Pluto brings with it extremes on a good day. But this Saturn magnifying the obvious Pluto is encouraged to run rampant with his agenda. And Pluto's agenda is birth, death, and transformation. And they are just the appetizers for this underlord. So transformations don't come cheap. Catharsis is an essential part of the plan. Pluto is always willing to point out the price for such a journey. You have to pay the toll to the troll. Oh, okay. Now, Jupiter, the seeker. Jupiter's entrance into Sagittarius and its transit through Sagittarius this year till December 2nd is a markedly different tone. And from that, the cornucopia of Capricorn could happen. Jupiter wants to help us expand our worldview, open our options, magnify the possibilities for all. While Jupiter wants to run on excess a large portion of the skies, because of Saturn and Pluto heavily opposing such behavior, you can see that they're kind of counterbalancing each other a little bit. Now, Jupiter is the bigger of the planets, but Saturn and Pluto together in cahoots is is formidable. I mean, it's absolutely formidable. Jupiter is a much needed expansive energy, and God, we need that at this moment. We need expansion, but it should be worked with carefully and wisely, because it's also a huge fire planet and it tends to kind of blow things up if it's not careful. We are at the point that we don't have endless options in this finite world, and we are running out of time. We do have unlimited potential to find solutions to the very real issues we face, but the problems we have are time. We're running out of time, and these problems are solvable, but we have to work together, and we have the tools that can make the difference. We can do this in the time that we have, but we have to really come together. So in March, we've got this game changer Uranus coming into the mix. And Uranus finishes up the last of its transit through Aries March 7th. And it re-enters Taurus to stay for good until 2026. And we're being asked to have to revolutionize how we relate to our resources. Uranus in Taurus shifts the ground we often take for granted as solid. So everything that you thought you could rely upon, that you thought was solid, suddenly shifts. Like in San Francisco, in those places where the earth was filled in and that ground becomes like quicksand. So we are going to have to shift our priorities in regard to what we work towards building. Nothing in the physical world will actually be what it seems at the beginning of this transit. We're all standing on that quicksand. Some of us know that and are throwing ourselves flat on the sand to get level with the changes happening. Others are standing up and do not realize that they're sinking into the muck of their own self-denial. With so many major planetary transits occurring in Earth signs this year, we know that how we work, what we build, what we consider a resource, and what we will end up understanding as essential to our ability to live on this earth will change greatly. We're about to be taught a huge lesson. We will see how we respond. How quickly we respond to the changing crises is going to determine the amount of suffering we will encounter before we find that safe and solid ground of our authentic self, which is ultimately the goal. I know that outside of alternative facts about our climate and environmental conditions, living within the boundaries of the natural world is essential to being allowed to exist on this planet. You know, we've been gifted this life. I mean, if you do not honor it, it can and will be taken from you. We're all of this earth. We're all going to die at some point. Our choices and decisions from this point on impact the welfare of everyone. Far from owners of this world, we are just visitors. And if we're lucky and smart, we will realize that our relationship to and dependence on each other and this beautiful world is an incredible gift. And we want to honor it as well as we can. Okay, I know that was kind of a lot. Sorry about that. Trying to encapsulate a whole bunch of things happening in March into a form that doesn't feel so detail-oriented and anally retentive. Thanks for listening. Okay, bye.